The wind howled a song of frost and desolation, a ceaseless choir against the skeletal birch trees. Elias, his calloused hands aching with cold, wrestled with a stubborn fence post, the frozen ground refusing to yield. It was the winter of 1888, and the promise of a life carved from the unforgiving Alaskan wilderness felt as remote as a summer's day. His small farm, a meager cluster of cabins and a half-built barn near the Russian River, was a testament to his solitary stubbornness. He'd come to Alaska to escape a past he couldn't outrun, seeking solace in the vast emptiness, but the land demanded more than he had to give. A figure emerged from the blizzard, a silhouette against the whiteout, moving with a silent grace that belied the treacherous terrain. Elias paused, his breath fogging the air. She was a woman of the mountains, her face etched with the harsh beauty of the land, her eyes the color of a stormy sky. She wore thick furs, a bearskin cloak over her shoulders, and carried a long, sinewy knife at her hip. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze piercing, unwavering. "You're a long way from any home, farmer," she said, her voice a low, steady rumble, like a distant rockslide. "And your fire is dying." Elias said nothing, just gripped his pickaxe tighter. This was his land. He had no claim on it, not yet, but he had bought it, fought for it, and now he was starving on it. "My name is Lyra," she continued, her words cutting through the wind. "I've watched you. You work like a man with a ghost on his back. You won't survive this winter alone. The ground will take you before the thaw." He scoffed. "And what makes you think you know anything about me?" Lyra took a step closer, the cold air clinging to her. "I know the difference between a man who belongs here and a man who is running. You are the latter. The land feels it." She gestured to the half-finished fence. "This is a fool's errand. You're losing strength and your supplies are low." A knot of pride tightened in Elias's chest. "I'm a farmer. I make things grow." "Then grow something else," she said, her eyes intense. "Lie with me, or die. The mountains demand a choice. A man and a woman must join to face the cold. Two fires burn brighter than one, and we must be strong enough to survive this winter. I have a cabin further north, well stocked and strong. We can live there until the thaw. We can become a family." The audacity of her offer was a physical blow. He stared at her, the wind whipping his hair, the snow blinding his vision. "You're a mad woman," he finally said, the words barely a whisper. "I don't know you. This is an absurd demand." Lyra's expression didn't change. "This is Alaska. There is no absurd, only survival. Think of it as a treaty with the wild. You get a home, warmth, and food. I get a strong man by my side. The mountains have been too quiet for too long. If you stay here, you will be one with the permafrost, a lonely ghost." He considered her words, the chilling reality of his situation pressing in. His hands were numb. The meager food stores in his shack would not last another 2 weeks. He'd been a fool to think he could conquer this place alone. The land had a voice, and it was speaking through this strange, fierce woman. The choice she offered was not a choice at all. It was a desperate plea for both of their lives. "You're not giving me a choice," Elias said, the bitterness heavy in his voice. "I am," she replied, a faint, unreadable smile on her lips. "I am offering you a life. It will be a hard life, a cold one, but a life nonetheless. So, farmer, what will it be?" The blizzard intensified, a furious swirl of white and wind, and in the heart of that storm, Elias stood paralyzed. He was a man of the earth, a creator of life, and this woman was a force of nature, an elemental creature of the wild. Her proposal was a surrender, a forfeiture of his old life for a new one, a path he had never even imagined. And yet, the alternative, death by ice and hunger, was a certainty. He looked at the vast, silent wilderness around them, and for the first time he felt truly small, truly lost. The truth of her words, that he was a man with a ghost on his back, running from a past he couldn't escape, echoed in his mind. He had come here to be free, but he had only traded one prison for another. Lyra waited as still as the trees, her eyes fixed on him. The air thrummed with a tension that had nothing to do with the storm. This was more than a proposition. It was a pact. He had to decide now, before the cold claimed him entirely. He began, his voice cracking. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that subscribe button to be notified when the next chapter drops. Elias followed Lyra through a blinding snow, the world reduced to a blur of white. They walked for hours, their footsteps muffled by the fresh powder. She moved with an innate knowledge of the land, her pace steady and tireless, as if she were a part of the storm itself. He, in contrast, stumbled, his limbs heavy with exhaustion and dread. Every fiber of his being screamed that this was a mistake, but the memory of his freezing shack and the spectre of a lonely death pushed him forward. They arrived at her cabin just as the last light faded. It was tucked into a hollow, a log structure solid against the wind, with a wisp of smoke curling from its stone chimney. Inside, the cabin was small but meticulously organized. Furs lined the walls, a fire crackled in the hearth, and the scent of drying herbs hung in the air. A large hunting rifle rested on a rack, and a collection of tools, far more sophisticated than his own, were neatly arranged on a workbench. This was not a makeshift shelter. It was a home built to withstand the harshest of winters. Lyra was no fool. She was a survivor. She pointed to a pile of thick furs in a corner. "Sleep there. The fire will hold until morning." She then went about preparing a meal, her movements fluid and efficient. She sliced strips of dried meat and pounded it with berries into a paste, a traditional food of the native tribes. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the whistle of the wind. Elias sat on a log stool, watching her. He felt like a castaway who had been plucked from the sea by a creature of legend. Her silence was more unnerving than her initial blunt demand. There was no romance in this, no grand gesture. This was a brutal contract of survival, a truth more frightening than any ghost story. Lyra, for her part, acted as if he were simply another piece of equipment she had acquired, necessary for the winter, but not worth much conversation. As the days turned into a week, then two, a tense routine settled between them. Elias chopped wood, melted snow for water, and mended things. Lyra hunted, snared small game, and preserved food. They spoke only when necessary, their words clipped and transactional. The trap needs mending. The woodpile is low. The snow is deep. The lack of personal interaction gnawed at Elias, a man used to the small talk and communal life of a small farming town. He felt more alone in this cabin with her than he had in his solitary shack. One evening, after a long day of clearing snow from the cabin's roof, Elias sat by the fire, his mind drifting back to his life before Alaska. The reason he was here was a bitter memory. A debt he couldn't pay, a family he had let down. He had run from his failure, but the cold, quiet stillness of Lyra's cabin was forcing him to confront it. He was a man defined by his failures, and here, in this frozen silence, he was facing the ultimate one, his inability to survive on his own. Lyra watched him from across the fire, her expression unreadable. He felt her gaze, a weight on his shoulders. He finally broke the silence. "You said we should become a family. What does that mean?" She met his gaze, and for the first time he saw a flicker of something other than pragmatism in her eyes. It was a raw, aching loneliness, quickly masked. "It means we survive. Alone, we die. Together, we have a chance." "Is that all it is?" he pressed, his voice full of the frustration and fear he had been bottling up. "A contract, a means to an end." Lyra stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. She walked to him and knelt, her hands resting on his knees. Her touch was warm, and for a fleeting moment Elias felt a connection, a spark of humanity in the frozen void. "No," she said, her voice a low whisper. "It is not all. It is a beginning. The mountains take, but they also give back. When you live this close to death, you learn to cherish life, every moment, every breath. We are not just surviving, farmer. We are living. We are a man and a woman in a world that wants to swallow us whole. And when we find that we can share a fire, we find something worth fighting for." She looked at him, her eyes searching his, and in the depth of her gaze, Elias saw a truth that froze him to the core. This was not a desperate plea for survival. It was a desperate plea for connection. She had seen his loneliness, but he had not seen hers. Lyra was as much a prisoner of the mountains as he was, bound by their silent, crushing isolation. And he realized that she was not just offering him a way to survive. She was asking him to share her burden, to be her partner in a world that had forgotten how to be kind. The chilling truth was not the danger of the wild, but the profound, bone-deep isolation that had driven them both to this moment. The cabin became a crucible, the long, dark winter forging a new kind of bond between Elias and Lyra. Their early, transactional relationship softened into a quiet, unspoken understanding. They didn't fall in love conventionally. They built their connection through shared hardship and small acts of kindness. Elias learned to track and hunt from Lyra, a patient teacher. In return, she learned about his past, his lost farm, and the debt he couldn't escape. She saw his pain and offered no judgment, only a quiet presence that lessened his burden. One afternoon, a violent storm pinned them inside. Elias, bored, began carving a small wooden doll, a crude, simple thing. Lyra, watching him, her usual impassive expression softened by curiosity, finally asked what it was. "A doll," Elias said, his voice catching. "For my daughter." Lyra sat beside him. "Did you lose her?" she asked gently. Elias nodded, his eyes fixed on the doll. "The debt, I had to choose. The farm or the doctor. I chose the farm. I lost them both." He trailed off, the memory a physical ache. Lyra placed her hand over his, a silent offering of empathy. "The mountains take," she said, "but they do not judge. Here there are no debts. There is only what is and what will be." He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. He realized her brutal honesty was born from a deep loneliness, a need for a partner to share the unbearable weight of life in the wild. She had offered him a new life, and in turn, he had given her a human connection. The ice around his heart began to crack. He finished the doll and gave it to her. She held it, tracing the smiling face, a single tear falling from her eye. "We will build a new farm," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "A place where things grow, where we can have a life." The winter finally broke. The thaw was a slow, majestic event. Elias and Lyra, now a true team, worked together to prepare the land. One day they stood on a hill overlooking the first green shoots. He turned to her, the words he needed to say finally coming. "You saved me," he said, his voice raw with emotion. Lyra's eyes, now the color of a clear summer sky, met his. "We saved each other," she said simply. "The mountains demand a choice, and we chose to live." She took his hand, her grip strong and certain. It was not a kiss, but something more profound, a partnership forged in the heart of the Alaskan wilderness. Hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.